Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today presenting to you. This was a fascinating presentation to put together, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Let's jump into the objective of today's presentation. I'm going to talk to you about a survey that CAI sent out last November. Now, the truth is that this is not our first survey. We've been sending surveys for, I'd say probably the past 10 years. But typically, we use that information primarily to help us determine which webinars would be most of interest to those of you around the world, those of you primarily in leadership and project management positions. This year, however, upon looking at the results of the survey, I appealed to Michael Maludis and to Susan for permission to take the information, the results of the survey, and analyze the results to determine if there were insights there. Insights into what you, the respondents, think is the current state and the potential future direction of project management. And so I'll talk a little bit about the methodology in a second. But again, I want to tell you that it was a fascinating opportunity, a fascinating exercise to analyze this information. And I hope that you find some of the insights, some of the conclusions, both rewarding and enlightening. So the agenda for today's presentation is as presented on this slide. First, I'll talk a little bit about the methodology of the survey, share the 4 questions, and it was a very brief survey. Very briefly summarize some of the key findings, and then we'll go back into those in more detail. Then I will take each of the 4 questions in turn and explain how we analyzed the results and how that led to particular conclusions, but most importantly, how we were able to validate the input from the respondents and align the input to what is, in many cases, an existing project management body of knowledge. Something I think you'll find very, very interesting. Then finally, I will repeat some of the conclusions and again, in my opinion, most importantly, provide some recommendations, what we believe you should do based on the results of this survey. Then I would like to open the floor to any questions, comments, feedback. And in particular, I'm going to be asking you for some feedback in particular regarding whether you would like to be included in future surveys. And if so, your suggestions for questions that we might want to include. So with that said, let's begin a little summary of the survey methodology. As I mentioned, it was a very brief survey, simply 4 questions. The survey was sent to approximately 300 project management professionals, sent out in early November of last year. All of the respondents were frequent contributors to the Great IT Professional, something that many of you may remember as the IT Metrics and Productivity Institute. So all of the respondents have given multiple webinars, multiple IT MPI webinars in the past. In terms of the role these people play, the respondents included professional project managers, PMO directors, many independent project management consultants, senior executives for both small and large corporations responsible for project management delivery in their respective organizations, and a smattering of instructors, teachers, professors, and PM mentors. Now, the survey response rate was fairly good, about 55%. So it gave us a lot of data to analyze. The first thing I did was analyze the results for general findings, and I'll share those in a minute with you. Then tallied and grouped the responses, and I'll explain again in a little bit what that means. Then the conclusions. This is the very interesting part. The conclusions were validated with research and input from external sources. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then finally, recommendations and best practices were identified. And of course, I will share all of those with you. So just for your information, these were the 4 questions that were included in the survey. The first was, what would you list as the top practices of effective project management today? Number two, what are the best methods for monitoring and identifying impending project problems or trouble? Number three, what are the most important characteristics of a great project manager, both now and into the future? And then four, what are the special challenges, if any, of managing a collection or program, I hesitate to say portfolio at this point, of projects? So that was the survey. Now, the analysis and findings at a very high level include the following. First of all, current project management practices do tend to remain focused on the tactical aspects of project management, what I refer to as project administration. However, and this is encouraging from my perspective, project management focus is moving from project administration to project leadership. And we'll be talking a lot about project leadership in the next minutes. And then finally, project management, as you see it, comprises three disciplines: project leadership, project administration, and subject matter expertise. Now, this should come as no surprise to you because the Project Management Institute talent triangle sort of aligns to these same three elements. There's leadership, obviously. Then there's what PMI refers to as technical project management, what I call project administration. And then they include strategic and business management, excuse me. But in the research and analyzing the results, that is really more aligned with subject matter expertise. And what they're referring to as strategic and business management is really the demand side of project governance. In other words, are we doing the right projects based on the business case of each potential project for our organization, as opposed to the supply side of project governance, which says, are we doing those projects right? So more or less aligned with the PMI talent triangle, but a slightly different focus. And we'll come back to this as we go through the presentation. Some more general findings. Project management acknowledges the need to adopt a methodology and tool to monitor continuously for early warning signs of project failure. Project management is evolving, fortunately, to insist that every project be managed using a tool that supports project leadership. Now, I want to just pause a second here. Every project that is successful has a tool that is used to manage both the cost and the schedule of the project. What is needed alongside that is another tool that allows you to manage the elements of project leadership. And that's going to come out again and again as we go through this. The most frequently cited skills required for effective project management are communication, leadership, and subject matter expertise. These to be followed by negotiation skills, estimating, and scheduling. This is what you have told us. These are the results of the respondents. Program or multi-project management is no longer considered a separate discipline. Very interesting. And the reason this is coming out this way is that many of you told us that all projects, especially those involving agile methodology, are in fact already collections of multiple parallel efforts, often that require coordination and prioritization. So some very interesting high-level analyses of where project management is today and where you, the respondents, think it is going. Now, let's talk a little bit about project leadership and project management. As I was analyzing the results of the survey, it became evident to me that there were two categories of responses, and they seemed naturally to fall into these two columns. What I refer to as project leadership and project management. More accurately, however, instead of project management, that should be project administration, which is the term I will be using throughout the rest of the presentation. So, very high level project leadership talks about communication, focus, motivation, inspiration, getting people, getting your project team, getting all stakeholders involved in the project to get the project done successfully. Project administration, if you will, the column on the right, talks about all of the technical things that need to be done to ensure that the project is being managed, monitored, and tracked and reported upon in a consistent and effective manner. Now, am I just being pedantic in all this? In other words, is this just semantics? Is there really a difference between project leadership and project management? What's interesting is to go back in time and look at the project management book of knowledge, body of knowledge, version 5, which one included count them, only 3 paragraphs on project leadership. And that PMBOK volume was somewhere on the order of 800 pages long. Out of 800 pages, there were 3 paragraphs on project leadership. Jump ahead a couple of years to PMBOK version 6, released in September of 2017. It then included a full chapter on the role of the project manager, focusing on technical skills, business understanding, and voila, finally, leadership. Spin ahead a little bit further, and according to recent PMI research, over 80% of high-performing organizations report that the most important acquired skill for project managers to successfully manage complex projects are leadership skills. Essentially a 360-degree turn on the part of PMI from dismissing leadership as being essentially 3 paragraphs and 800 pages to reporting that the most important acquired skill for project management is leadership. And to the point where now leadership has risen to share the stage with technical project management, what I refer to as project administration, and business knowledge. So interestingly enough, leadership is not just the same as project management. Leadership is now a key element of effective project management. And you may have heard terms like this: successful projects are led, not managed. And you may in fact have heard me say before, you cannot manage a project to success, you must lead a project to success. And just to validate this a little further, a recent study completed by McKinsey and Company, actually in May of last year, reports that, as it says at the very top, most of the skills that companies are increasingly focused on developing are social, emotional, and advanced cognitive. And if you look at the list of skills from the top down, number 1, leadership and managing others. Number 2, critical thinking. And number 3, project management. Interestingly enough, most companies' focus now is on leadership and project management. So let's jump into the questionnaire. Question number 1, top practices for effective project management today. You're going to see this kind of slide for each of the 4 survey questions. What I did was take all of the responses from the respondents from the surveys, and I grouped them into project leadership traits or skills and project administration elements. And the size of the word indicates the relative frequency that that particular response was received. So at this point, I enlisted the skills of some of CAI's most accomplished data analysts. And rather than just try to decipher what this means, I asked them to send search engines out over the internet and find something, some existing basis of analysis, some existing study that would take these same words and group them in the same way and come up with work that has already been done such that we would not have to do the same analysis. So throwing this set of words with this kind of emphasis at the internet, interestingly enough, showed us this. This is a match between the words, the responses from question number 1 of the CAI survey and, not surprisingly, Project Management Institute's 10 project management knowledge areas. In other words, if you took the same words and threw them at the PMI body of knowledge, what you would get is this same set, this same grouping of words. Now, very interestingly enough, you can say, well, that makes sense. This was a survey largely responded to by project management professionals, most of whom probably received their training and their certification based on PMI's body of knowledge, grouped into PMI's project management knowledge areas. But there's more to it than that. This additional studies have shown that although there are 10 elements, 10 knowledge areas, 10 dimensions of project management as defined by PMI, the two objective or quantifiable dimensions of project management, essentially time management and cost management, for which metrics and tools are commonplace, are almost never the cause of project failure. Rather, it's the 8 subjective or human dimensions of project management that are responsible 85% of the time for project failure. And I point this out because if we go back to the list that was provided by the survey, you'll find that what's interesting is that both schedule and cost management are not included here at all. And so what I did was try to help myself understand why is that. And basically what it's saying is that at this point in time, project management, schedule management, and cost management is a given. And there's more emphasis now on managing the human or subjective dimensions of projects. So let me go through some of my analyses on this particular question. Number one, project managers now understand the importance of project planning, estimating, and a fully documented, formally approved project charter. Number two, there is also clear awareness of the importance of managing the subjective or human dimensions of projects, including risk, scope, stakeholder management, issues management, change management, etc. This to me is a real sea change in the emphasis of project managers from managing the original traditional triangle of scope, scheduling, cost to now understanding and acknowledging, as it says here, that 85% of the time that projects fail, it's because we didn't adequately manage the elements shown in red on this slide. Unfortunately, as it says on the bottom of this slide, there is as yet less emphasis on the importance of project leadership. And that is evident here. If you look at the relationship, the number of words, the number of responses on the right column as compared to the number of responses in the left column. So there continues to be a strong emphasis on project administration, less of an emphasis yet on project leadership. Program management and agile appear as key skill areas, and we'll get into that in much more detail when we get to question number 4. And as I mentioned earlier, cost and schedule management do not appear. And what that tells me is that these dimensions are now fully managed with contemporary project management schedule tools, such as Microsoft's Project, etc. That part of project management is now fully managed, fully understood, and is no longer considered to be an area of concern. But a comparable or complementary tool is clearly needed to manage the subjective dimensions that all of you who responded to the survey have told us are important today and increasingly important in the future. Now, let's go on to question number 2. How is it best to identify impending project problems or project trouble? These were the responses from the project survey, again, grouped into project leadership and project administration. Again, asking the CAI data analysts, to compare this grouping, this set of elements to what's available on the internet. And not surprisingly, it found that there is existing research, there has been extensive research into what are the early warning signs of project failure. Two of them, the several that were popped up on the internet search, One is the Four Horsemen of IT Project Doom, an extensive study that was conducted by Dr. Leon Kappelman of the University of North Texas. A second one, Risk Factors in Enterprise-Wide ERP Projects by Mary Sumner. And again, there were several others, but the one we really want to hone in on is Dr. Kappelman's research. Not because it's uh, something that we have coincidentally been working on for a number of years, but because it is such an incredibly precise fit with the responses that came back from survey participants. Now, Dr. Kappelman's research analyzed several hundred projects that had failed in one way or another. And the result of his research was to identify 53 root causes. And just as an aside, what an interesting element of this is that there was not a single technical issue among the top 40. And so these are ranked in order of the frequency with which this particular early warning sign was in fact the root cause of the project having failed. Now, he was able to pare them down into what he referred to as the Four Horsemen of IT Project Doom. And it turns out that there are 6 people-related risks and 6 process-related risks. And if we match the work that Dr. Kappelman did with the results of our survey, you can see an incredibly precise match of our respondents saying these are exactly the same things that they would look for as early warning signs of impending project failure. So what does that tell us? Number one, the early warning signs of impending project failure are now very well understood. Dr. Kappelman was a pioneer in his day. His research has been replicated time and time again to the point where most project managers now understand those 12 early warning signs are in fact the things you need to be monitoring continuously to ensure that your project will succeed. As it says here, PMs now understand the need to monitor the 6 people and 6 process-related risks. And every project requires a formal and continuous process to automate monitoring those early warning signs. Question number 3. What are the skills of a great project manager now and into the future? These are the results of that particular question. One thing that should jump out at you immediately is the growing emphasis, the growing awareness of the importance of project leadership as opposed to project administration in terms of these are the skill sets that a project manager should have. So again, doing our research, seeking validation of this particular set of elements, of components, led to a match that looks like this. And you might think, what in heaven's name can be that precise, can be that good a match to what the respondents of the survey said? And the answer is Project Management 2.0. If you're not familiar with it, PM 2.0 consists of 6 major elements. There's collaboration, key metrics and key performance indicators, continuous measurement of feedback from all stakeholders, as well as continuous measurement of the emergence of the early warning signs of project failure, displaying all of that in a dynamic and proactive dashboard. Governance, I mentioned earlier, there are 2 elements of governance. There's the demand side, are we doing the right things? Are we doing the right projects? And the supply side, which says, are we doing those projects right? And then the most important key, linking everything together, is project leadership. And you can drill down a little bit more. I strongly encourage all of you to become more familiar with PM 2.0, or as it's now referred to, advanced project management. And here's a drill down into each of the 6 major elements, providing a little bit more detail about what each one of those elements contains. But the important thing, excuse me, I'm choking here, is the fact that if you match the elements of PM 2.0 to what people responded to in the survey, it's almost a 1-for-1 match, which tells me that the skills that a project manager needs today are all included in PM 2.0. And so what analysis can we derive from this? First of all, project leadership skills are now recognized as critical to project success. And I'll repeat what I displayed earlier. According to PMI research, over 80% of high-performing organizations say that the most important skills for project managers are leadership skills. Leadership and communication were listed as the most important keys to effective project management. Effective project management requires expertise in the following areas: leadership, governance, metrics, collaboration, feedback, and status monitoring. Those are the 6 areas that a project manager has to manage, has to master to be effective in today's world. And subject matter understanding or expertise has emerged as a critical PM skill. That appeared on a number of survey responses. And what's interesting here is that for many years, there has been a debate as to whether a skilled project manager can effectively manage a project without any understanding of the subject area that the project deals with. I have long felt, and this is substantiated in this survey, that that's really not the case. You can't truly and effectively manage a project if you absolutely have no skill, no understanding of the subject area that the project involves. Now, you don't have to be the world's best expert, but you certainly have to understand the subject matter related to the project. So getting a little bit more specific, if we are talking about the elements of Project Management 2.0 or Advanced Project Management, what you need to do, what you need to have in place are the elements in the column on the right. So, for example, if we take project leadership, the last row on this particular matrix, you need to have access to project management best practices. You need to understand what they are, you need to embrace them, and you need to make them part of the way you do business. You also have to have access to guidance, to some mentoring. In other words, given the status of your project, the situation the project's in, what do I do to correct it? And this either comes through experience or it comes by having a tool that helps you understand the options that you have in a particular situation and recommends what course of action would be best to correct the project. So a lot of elements here. There are a number of things that need to be put in place for projects to be managed effectively. Project management is not simple. And I think this particular chart, if no other, highlights that fact. And so the elements in the column on the right are all things that you must have for effective project management. Now, question number 4. I thought this one was very interesting. What, if any, are the special challenges of managing a collection or program of projects? Not a lot of response here. And at first I thought, wow, this is telling. What this suggests perhaps is that this group of respondents didn't have a lot of, or doesn't have a lot of experience in managing collections of projects. And I was absolutely incorrect in that initial assumption. Rather, what this is saying is that considering program or multi-project management as a separate and more advanced discipline area of project management is no longer true. And so rather, again, by throwing these words into our data search, what it showed was that we're actually talking about agile development. And the analysis tells us that program or multi-project management is no longer considered a special or advanced branch of project management. Every project manager now is expected to have this skill to be able to manage multiple parallel, interrelated, interdependent initiatives that are part of a single overall program. Most projects are now, in fact, being managed as a collection of related individual initiatives, typically spawned from an agile methodology in the form of scrums as individual sprints or iterations. And my research also showed that agile methodology is now being used by anywhere between 86 and 96% of all software development teams, depending upon the research and survey that you find. And it's also being used not just for IT application development, but for non-IT projects and teams in organizations. And so I think it's very interesting that these components, communication, coordination, delegation, leadership, prioritization, and triage are now absolutely vital to every project, not as a separate and an advanced element or component or branch of project management. As it says here, these terms identified by the survey respondents are core to agile project management methodology, whether applied to IT development or non-IT organizations and initiatives. And one respondent to the survey summed it up beautifully, and I've included the quotation here. All projects are collections of projects. There is no difference except in the number of problems to solve. And so I do know that originally, or even perhaps still today, you can get separate certification from PMI in program and portfolio management. And I think what your responses to the survey have told us is that's outdated, that should no longer be considered an advanced branch of project management. It is core to the way all projects need to be managed today. Now, overall conclusions and recommendations. Conclusion, I guess the first here, effective project management comprises three equal elements or components. The first is project leadership. What do I recommend that you do? Number one, seek and hire or contract with project managers who have proven leadership skills or provide leadership training to your existing project managers. PM also comprises project administration, what the Project Management Institute refers to as technical project management. What do we recommend you do? Ensure that all of your project managers are trained in the basic PMI knowledge areas. And the easiest way to do that is simply to send your project managers to obtain PMP certification or the equivalent from one of the other sanctioning bodies. And effective project management also requires subject matter expertise. One cannot effectively manage a project without understanding, without ideally having some level of expertise in the project's subject matter. Just as an aside, one book I highly recommend that you read is called Now It Can Be Told. And it's the story of the Manhattan Project during World War II, developing the initial atomic bomb. And it was written by the general who was the overall project program manager of the Manhattan Project. And I bring it up here because he started out obviously not being an expert in nuclear physics. And he understood very quickly that in order for him to effectively manage that initiative, he had to learn enough about nuclear physics to be able to carry on intelligent conversations with the many PhDs who were responsible for the technical matter. And so it's a great book. It's one I very, very highly recommend. It's a classic study on the effectiveness of project management. Another conclusion, monitoring the early warning signs of impending project problems is essential. What we recommend you do is implement a process and a supporting tool that monitors continuously for the emergence of any one of the 12 early warning signs. absolutely vital that you do that. And the survey results said, we acknowledge it, we understand it, we understand what the 12 early warning signs are, and we are managing to them. Project management success is dependent on effectively managing the subjective knowledge areas. If we go back to the 10 knowledge areas of Project Management Institute, two of them are objective, the cost and schedule of the project. The other 8 involve a subjective or human element. We know we have tools like Microsoft Project that effectively allow us to manage schedule and cost. We need a corresponding complementary tool that allows us to manage effectively the 8 subjective or human dimensions of every project. You must implement such a tool. Conclusion. Effective project management requires expertise in the following areas from PM 2.0 or advanced project management. What do we recommend? Number one, understand the evolution of project management from PM 1.0 to PM 2.0. Make sure you understand the difference and the migration, the evolution of project management from 1 to 2. Implement a process and tool to obtain continuous feedback from all project stakeholders. Implement a process and tool to monitor the key performance indicators and early warning signs, however you can do that. Next conclusion, all projects are collections of related and interdependent activities. Recommendation here, adopt agile development methodology or Gs if you haven't already done so. This is where the world is going. I've got some personal issues and concern with some of the implementations and adoptions of Agile. Separate discussion for another time. But overall, all projects are in fact collections of interdependent and parallel initiatives that have to be managed, have to be coordinated in a program fashion. And finally, a little bit of a plug here. Project management is evolving continuously and demands continuous learning for all project managers. And our recommendation here is that you subscribe to the Great IT Professional, the organization that in fact is sponsoring this presentation. Now, just a final mention about what exactly is leadership. And I encourage you to read the book, The Power of Project Leadership, and I'll show you a reference to it in just a second. But these are the key elements of what leadership means. Be authentic, lead with vision, improve and innovate continuously, empower your team, establish a close relationship with your stakeholders, build a solid foundation of trust, and finally work with intent. I've got an entirely separate presentation I'd be happy to share with any of you about what each of these means, what it means to manage to lead a project to success through leadership. But again, a lot of this comes from the book, The Power of Project Leadership. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I would like something from each of you. First of all, I would like some feedback as to the whether you see value in this presentation. So please send me an email to john.bowen@cai.io. If you would like a copy of the presentation, I would be happy to send you a PDF copy of it. I would like to know if you would like your name to be included in the CAI 2022 survey. Based on the response to this presentation and to the analysis and recommendations, I would like to suggest that we do this on an annual basis at least, if not every 6 months, and provide feedback to you on a continuous basis. So if you would like to be included, please include your business email address for us. And then finally, if I would like you to recommend or suggest questions to be included in the 2022 project management survey. Those areas that you think you would like to learn more about, those areas that you would be curious as to hear what other people believe or feel. And so please do that. So I mentioned that I always include some recommended readings in all of my presentations. And this one, Project Management 2.0 by Dr. Harold Kersner, is pretty much the Bible about PM 2.0. Highly recommend the book. The Power of Project Leadership, I already mentioned. So the one that's not on here is Now It Can Be Told about the Manhattan Project. And here are some online references that I also encourage you to investigate. So with that having been said, I would love to get some feedback and some questions and engage in some discussion with any of you. Are there any questions?
Is there a tool you would recommend for continuous feedback from stakeholders?
The answer, quite honestly, is yes. I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation that we've been doing surveys for quite a number of years. And one of the reasons we did them was to determine what kinds of aids people needed to be more effective at project management. And quite honestly, one of the tools we developed over the years is a tool called True Project. And best source of information is trueprojectinsight.com. And it was developed long before the results of this survey, specifically because we were having some issues with project management and wanted to fix them, and developed a tool that was custom built to do this exactly thing and the exact thing. And it it is rocket science to an extent, but it's not either, because if you go back in time, when Hewlett and Packard formed the HP company, they developed a process called management by walking around. Nothing sophisticated about it. Every week they would speak to each one of their employees and they would ask four questions. Did you get done what you were intending to do this week? Do you know what's expected of you next week? And do you have all of the resources, the tools, the training, the funding to get done next week what you need to? And finally, is there anything else you'd like to share with me about the project or about the morale of the group? And so to a certain extent, if you can automate that, you can implement management by walking around, regardless of how large your project team is and where they're located geographically around the world. Now, it's much more sophisticated than that, but so the short answer to it's actually a long answer to a short question is yes, I would recommend True Project.
Oh, we do have another comment. I'm very pleased to see the recognition of the importance of subject matter expertise for the PM versus the notion that a PM can manage any type of project without specific knowledge.
I'm glad to hear that feedback. It's been an ongoing debate my entire career. I can recall 35 years ago, people saying, a good project manager should be able to manage any project, regardless of whether he or she has any idea what the project's about. And never believed that. I'm even absolutely more convinced now that that's nonsense, that you absolutely have to have some level of understanding of what the project's about. And the more understanding, the better, in my opinion. And so, yes, I think the results of this survey, if nothing else, have convinced me that over time people have come to the same conclusion. And please let me know if you would like to be included in next year's survey, and if you have any suggested questions for us to include in next year's survey. And I guess the final thing is, do you think this kind of feedback from these surveys is helpful, useful, and would you like us to continue presenting them to you?
Thank you, John, for presenting with us as always. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everybody.